Susan's going to just give a brief introduction, and then we'll go into the heart of the presentation. Oops.
Ready?
Yeah.
First off, good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Jacobson, the Affordable Housing Director for the town of Norfolk. I want to thank you for taking the time out to attend our public forum this evening. I do anticipate we will have some trust members attend, but not all were able to make it. I wanted to let the people that are joining, some of you may know, but kind of give you just a quick overview of what the Norfolk Affordable Housing Trust has been working on. In the last 8 years, we've purchased 18 single-family homes in town and held lotteries for buyers that meet the current rules and regulations, if you will, to enter a lottery. As many people know, we have 40B units going up throughout town, and I am a certified lottery agent for both the Department of Housing and Community Development, local initiative programs, and local action units. And I'm also able to represent developers who are putting in or developing these 40Bs in town as the lottery agent, and they are charged for my services. So I am able to bring revenue into the town to help offset funding for salaries and other things. We have, I'm currently working on, as a lottery agent, on 3 developments in town and 2 units that'll be opening soon in Medway. And I have 3 additional projects coming into the pipeline. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Jen Goldson from JM Goldson. She is the consultant that we have hired to help us with updating our housing production plan. Our plan was first certified in 2017. Jen was involved with that plan as well. And for many important reasons, but probably the most notable reason is safe harbor. You do not want your housing production plan to lapse. So our plan expires in October, and we will be submitting this plan along with Jen to the Department of Housing and Community Development for certification in August. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
Great. Well, we're really happy to be here. I have members of my team here as well, Andrew, Oliver, and Laura Smead, and they'll be helping out, particularly Andrew, in the chat. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to use the chat. We also have the Q&A function open. I'll talk about those in a little bit. There'll be other ways to participate as well, but let me just talk about what we're even doing here tonight. So I'm a planning consultant. We're based in Roslindale, a neighborhood of Boston, and we do this type of work for lots of communities in Massachusetts, particularly more suburban communities, and we really love working with communities like yours. And we also love coming back to you after 5 years when your plan is on the brink of expiring, and we're happy to help get it up to date. So we're going to share some preliminary findings. We've been doing interviews and focus groups, as well as a housing needs assessment, updating that, looking at the most recent census data that's available. And we'll share a little bit about what we found, and we'd love your reaction to that. We'd love to hear your perspective about how you're seeing housing needs, what you're concerned about, and what kind of opportunities you're seeing in your community. And sometimes the data that we present doesn't match what you see on the ground, and we'd love to hear that as well. And we'll have some opportunities specifically around answering questions around, does the data we're presenting make sense and match up with what you're seeing on the ground? And then we want to show you how you can contribute to the process and participate in addition to coming tonight. So tonight, though, we have essentially 4 ways you can participate. The first on the slide is that we have some polling questions and open-ended questions as well that we're going to actually start off in just a few slides, so you can try it out. It's through this website, Poll Everywhere. So it's pollev.com. /Gen-G, and the capitals and lowercase don't matter. That's just so you can read a little bit easier. And I'll give you instructions on that. But for those of you maybe who are familiar with this already, you can go ahead and log right into that link. Andrew's also going to share that in the chat. So we also have the chat open. You can share your thoughts to us at any time, and we are monitoring the chat. So if there's something that either I present or Andrew presents and it doesn't make sense, or you want some clarification, or you have a question about it, please do use the chat to communicate us during this webinar. The difficulty with webinars is I can't see you, so I can't see if what I'm saying is making sense. So I will also check in with you sometimes and say, let me know if this is making sense. So you can put that in the chat. And then we do have the Q&A, which many of you may have been involved in webinars like this, but we have that open because it's easier to track. If somebody asks a question, we can kind of mark off basically if we've answered it or not. We can answer it live, or we can give you a written answer. So that's a great way if you have a question that you really want answered. And then at the end of the presentation, we're also going to have time for just an open comment period. So anyone who's interested in speaking, you can raise your hand on Zoom, and we will promote you and unmute you so that you can either comment or ask other questions that way as well. All right, good. So let's go into this. Oh, the other thing I want to say is that all of your comments today are part of the public record. We are streaming this live tonight, and all of your written comments in the chat, even if it seems like you're sending a private message, those are all part of the public record and will be part of the transcript, including anything you write in the Q&A. And then anything you say, verbally, we'll capture as well in our summary of this event. And then we also have a feature turned on that you can upvote questions. So if you see someone asked a question in the chat and you think that's a great question, you can, give it a thumbs up. All right. So what will the housing plan include? And so it will include analysis that we'll go over tonight. We've done quite a bit of analysis already, and we have a pretty extensive draft document that's been circulated to the trust and town staff to give comments on, and that will all be part of your housing plan. Then we will create through the focus groups and interviews, as well as a survey that's online, we'll create goals and strategies. What are your priorities in the next 5 years for housing? And we're going to talk more about what the possibilities are too, but just to give you a general sense of what's included in the plan. And then the plan will also have an action plan that says who does what, when, and what do you focus on first? Okay, so first let's describe some general things. So first of all, what is the subsidized housing inventory? It's basically a list of all the affordable housing units that the state counts towards its 10% goal. And so what I want to do is check in the chat. Can you just tell me if you feel like pretty familiar with 40B? Just say yes, or you can say no, not really. And just put that in the chat. I want to get a sense of how much detail would be helpful to go into for you. Okay, so some people are answering already. No, yes. Okay. So it looks like, okay, no. So there's a little bit of a mixture. Okay, great. This is helpful for me. So as I'm talking about this, please do ask clarifying questions. If I'm going over anything, you're like, she's skipping over what this means. I'm going to try not to do that, but catch me out if I'm using any jargon. So the subsidized housing inventory is a list that the state keeps that documents all of the affordable units that the state counts as affordable. I'm going to talk about what that means exactly, but it has a list of units for every town, and it looks at how many total housing units or homes are in your town that are year-round. So some seasonal communities, may have a lot of vacation homes; those don't count. But for communities like Norfolk, most of your housing stock is year-round. People who live in your community year-round, and so they look at the amount of housing units, and then the goal of the state is to have 10% of those units count on this list called the Subsidized Housing Inventory, or SHI, or sometimes people call it the SHI. So Norfolk is currently at 6.01% on the subsidized housing inventory. So you have 187 units that count towards that 10% goal, and that makes 6% of your total year-round housing units. And that means you need 124 units more to meet that 10% goal. Now, those can be new construction. Those can also be through converting existing homes. So it doesn't have to be new construction. In fact, that's what your trust's local action program is doing. It's buying homes and converting them to affordable homes that then count on this list, the SHI. So the benefits of being over 10% are that you have more local control to shape development that the community wants. And I'm going to talk, I have a few more slides about 40B, but before I get too deep into the weeds, what I want to do is hear a bit more about who you are. And we're going to ask you just a few questions about yourself, about your age and how long you've lived in Norfolk, if you're a resident. And so there's a few ways you can connect with this polling. And Andrew, if you haven't already, please do share the link right in the chat. You can use your phone and take a picture of that QR code if that's the easiest way for you. You can go to a browser right on the device that you're watching this Zoom on and use the link that Andrew gave you in the chat, pollev.com/GenG. Or you can even text your answers. So you can go into your messages and the phone number is 22333. And then your first message should be GenG. And again, the capitals, lowercase don't matter. We just did that so it's easier for you to read. So Gen is 2 N's, JENNG. And if you just send that GenG off to that text number, you should get a response back saying you're connected. So if you're having any trouble with this, let Andrew know. The instructions, again, are on the top of each slide in case I skipped over that too fast, but great. Some of you are answering. So the question is, are you a resident here? Are you employed here? And you can answer more than one choice because you may live here and work here, or you may also be a business owner. And so answer as many as are applicable to you. And then we do have the last category is F, which is if I didn't think of all the ways you could be connected to the town and want to come to this meeting. So we have, it looks like things are slowing down here. So we have 42% of your answers are a resident. And again, because I said you can pick more than one, we don't know just by looking at this slide how many are non-residents. 21% employed in Norfolk, 7% business owner, and 27% serving as town official. Great. I'm going to move on. If for some reason you're having any trouble with this or you're not sure it's working, you can always email Andrew at jmgoldson.com. And that's the backup plan if this doesn't work for you. And he can hopefully, Andrew, did you put that in the chat already? Yeah, he probably did. Okay, great. All right, good. So let's move on to the next one. It's not going. There we go. What is your age? And we just have these broad brackets here that actually match up with the census data that we have, so we can look and see, who's missing in this conversation. But it actually looks like you're pretty good spread, considering most folks real young in your community don't come out to these. But it looks like we have most people, about 38% of the responses are in that 55 to 64 category. And then we have a pretty equal spread around 45 to 54, 65 to 74, and 75 and over at each at 13%. And then we have about 25% saying 35 to 44. All right, great. And then this one is only for Norfolk residents. So if you are a resident, are you currently renting your home, owning your home, living with family or friends, unhoused, or some other living situation? Okay, it looks like the numbers aren't moving. So we have 80% owning, 20% renting. Okay, it's changing a little bit. We have 83% and 17% now. Great, but it looks like it's slowed down. Okay, and if you are a resident again, how long have you lived here? And it could be you lived here for a certain time, moved away, and came back. I would just add that all together because I think any time you spent living there should count. So I'm not sure if people are still answering, but it looks like the bars have stopped moving. So 67% are saying that you've lived here more than 30 years. We have 17%, 5 to 9 years, and 17%, 20 to 29 years. So, most of you, I don't know, I can't do the math quickly in my head, but over 83% of you have lived here. Did I do the math right? 20 years or more. I might have done the math wrong, but you can do the math yourself. All right, great. All right, so now let's just do a quick overview and this is a little bit repetitive of what I said in that early slide, but I wanted to lay that out first. And so just to go over some basics of 40B, when people talk about 40B, it's a state statute that essentially, it actually has a lot of things in it, but this particular section 20 to 23, is called the Comprehensive Permit Law. And that's when most people say 40B, they're talking about the Comprehensive Permit Law. And that's the law in the state that says the state has a goal of having every community, every municipality in the state have at least 10% of its housing stock as affordable. And I'm going to talk about exactly what that means. I'm going to break that down. But it was enacted in 1969, so this is not new. Some towns saw production at basically different times through the past 52 years, I guess it's been now, or 53 years. And it really depends on the market when you start to see 40Bs. Some towns with a market that just didn't support it didn't get any in the early part of this time frame, and then got more dependent on the market. And so I know that you've seen 40B developments. And so the whole idea of 40B is to promote inclusion by including diverse housing types, you're then promoting more diverse population. So the statute sets out actually two things. We talk about the 10% of year-round housing units most of the time because that's what this plan will focus on, and that's what most communities are focused on. There's also another goal in the plan that it's an either or. You can either have 10% of your year-round housing that's affordable or 1.5% of your land area. And a few towns have met that. Watertown and I believe Norwood have met that goal, but most towns have not, who've tried to meet that 1.5%. It's pretty difficult to make that argument. But I just wanted you to know that that's out there too. Some people call this the GLAM calculation. All right. And so what happens if you don't meet that 10%? So you're at 6.01%. So you don't meet it right now. So what happens? So what happens is if you don't have safe harbor, as Susan mentioned, this plan can help you get safe harbor depending on your production levels. But let's say you don't have that and you don't have your 10%. So what happens? Well, what happens is if those 40B goals are not met, the stick is that developers can then seek comprehensive permit, which streamline and consolidate local permits to be before the Board of Appeals. And the developer can then request waivers of those local regulations, and the Zoning Board of Appeals can grant those. If the Zoning Board doesn't grant, for the kind of comprehensive permit that I'm talking about, which provides at least 20 to 25% of units that are affordable, then if, let's say, the zoning board denies that application or imposes conditions, those are often overturned by the State Housing Appeals Committee. So the zoning board doesn't have a lot of authority to deny those kinds of applications. Another thing I want you all to know is that, and many of you may know this, but I think it's worth stating, all rental units, so 40B and the subsidized housing inventory treat rental projects and ownership projects differently in the way those units count on the SHI, or the subsidized housing inventory. If the project is all rental units, all apartments, all of those units will count as long as all of the other criteria are met, that you have 20 to 25% of the units affordable. All the units, even luxury market rate units in a rental development, will count towards your subsidized housing inventory, towards that 10%. And that's really, I think, put in as an incentive to allow rental developments. Ownership units, on the other hand, let's take condos, for example. If there's a multifamily development that's structured as condominiums, then only the deed restricted affordable units will count on the subsidized housing inventory. The market rate condos don't count. So that's the big difference between rental and ownership. And for communities who are focused on trying to get to the 10%, approving those kinds of rental developments can really help boost you closer to that number. But there's certainly a need, I would say, in your community for both rental and ownership. Okay, so Andrew, just let me know if there are any questions. I'm going through this, I think, relatively carefully, but if there are any questions at all, I'm happy to go back to anything. So what do we mean when we say you may or may not have noticed that I capitalized and underlined the word affordable a few times. I did it on this slide, and I think I did it before that too. I want to say I do that on purpose. I want to say what we mean by affordable housing. So to count toward the 40B goals of 10% or that 1.5% land area, a unit must be eligible for the SHI, and it has to meet 4 things. So it has to have a restriction, a long-term restriction, at least 30 years, that it will remain an affordable unit. It has to have a marketing plan, an approach that really promotes applicants from all over the region, not just from the community. So it's a fair marketing plan, fair and affirmative marketing plan. And then it also must have a specific approval or funding mechanism. So there are a number of state agencies that provide different programs developers can go under. And one that your housing trust uses, the local action unit program, is run by DHCD. That's an example of an approval or funding mechanism that can allow you to count those units on the subsidized housing inventory. And then the price, the rent or the mortgage payments need to be restricted to be affordable to a household at a certain income level. And I'm going to tell you what that income level is in a minute. And then the income level is restricted. So I'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so this is the slide on income. So if you look at income limits, you may hear people talk about low or moderate income. You may also hear them talk about 80% of the area median income or 80% AMI. And so what does that mean? I'm showing you some income thresholds on the slide here. You'll see that it varies by housing size, or household size, I should say. So let me just explain the slide first. So if you look here on my left, you have this single person living alone making $70,750 or less, and that person could qualify for affordable housing. That person would be considered having an income at or below that 80% AMI. And that's what I mean by when we look at 40B and what incomes you're allowed to restrict those units to, it can go up to 80% of the area median income. And that changes by household size. So this is for the 1-person household, 2-person household, 3-person, and 4-person. So 4-person, as an example, it could be 2 adults and 2 kids, or it could be 1 adult, 3 kids, could even be 4 adults in theory. It doesn't matter the age or how many income earners there are in the household. It's how many people are living in that household and what is that aggregated gross income of the household, of all the earners in the house. And so that's what that $101,000 is, the income cap for affordable units that are right at that 80% AMI. Okay, so I'm just going to pause here for a moment before I go on to the rest of the slide, because I've just given you a ton of information. And if you haven't heard this before, you might be scratching your head a little bit. So Andrew, can you just tell me how we're doing in the chat? And also, folks, if you feel confused, let me know. Or if you also feel that you understand things, let me know.
Yeah, nothing in there at the moment.
Okay, great. All right, good. And so the other things on the bottom of this slide I wanted to just make sure to mention is that I'm showing you 80% of the area median income, and that's the limit for affordable housing. But the area median is, right the middle, basically, 100% median income. would be 113,300 for the whole region. And this is something really important to understand. These income limits are not just for your town, your community. They look at the whole Boston metro region, which is over 100 communities all over the region are included in these calculations. And so when you look at Norfolk, you actually see that your incomes are much, much higher than the incomes you see in the region. And so the median household income for your town, for people who live in your town, this is an estimate from 2019 from the American Community Survey. So it is an estimate, it has a margin of error, but what you can see is that it's much higher. 151,279 is your median compared to the region. And so when we look at housing needs, sometimes we work in communities where your median income is much lower than the region, and we would look at your housing needs much different then. Okay, so I'm going to go on. We can always come back if there are more questions on this. So now, what a housing plan does, the kind of housing plan that we're creating for you, or really updating, that we created for you 5 years ago, it allows the ZBA and the town to make incremental progress. And what do I mean by that? It allows you the chance to have what Susan called safe harbor before. It's also called certification. It allows you to have safe harbor to give your zoning board more control over unwanted 40B proposals, comprehensive permit applications, at incremental stages rather than only when you meet that 10% or only when you meet the 1.5% land area. And so what do I mean by incremental progress to get safe harbor? So first of all, the first step is approving this plan that we're in the middle of writing and updating for you. And it lasts for 5 years. So once you approve it, you have this plan approved for 5 years. And the process of approving it is it must be approved by the planning board and the select board. And then you send it off to the state, and the state also approves it. Once you do that, you have an approved plan. In Norfolk, you would need to permit 16 homes that count on the subsidized housing inventory. And I said before, if you do a rental development, all the units will count. If you do an ownership or condo development, only the units that are deed restricted will count. So just so you know how to count that, you would need to create 16 units that are listed on the SHI. And if you can do that in a calendar year, then you can get this plan certified, and that gives you that safe harbor status. And what does that mean? So that means a certified community that has the safe harbor, that produced that 16 units, can for 1 year deny comprehensive permits that don't meet your local needs. And that ZBA decision, that Zoning Board of Appeals decision, will actually be upheld by the Housing Appeals Committee because you have this approved plan and you met that incremental production goal of the 16 units. Now, the state also allows you to have a 2-year safe harbor. The 16 homes is for 1 year safe harbor. To get 2 year, you need, it's double. So I didn't actually write it down, but I believe it's 31 units. So if you create 31 units in a calendar year, then you get 2 years of that safe harbor. So Andrew, just keep an eye on the chat. I'm going to move on, but if anybody has questions about that, happy to go back. Okay, so that's the basics of 40B and SHI. I just wanted you to understand the nature of what benefits this plan can give you, and what the thresholds are. And so, Andrew, I think you're going to take on this piece. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a question in here at the moment.
Okay, sure.
Are the units that are currently being constructed but not yet occupied included in the inventory for Norfolk?
Yeah, it depends. So once the zoning board approves and submits to the town clerk that the decision has been approved, you can ask for those units to count on the subsidized housing inventory. But then there are certain timeframes that the developer must meet for them to stay on the subsidized housing inventory. And I don't have these written down. And if Laura knows, Andrew, if you know off the top of your head, but it's a certain period of time before they can get the building permit. And then you have a certain period of time before you need to get the certificate of occupancy. So long as you meet those time thresholds, then those units will stay on the SHI even during construction before they're occupied. Okay. All right. Okay, great. And so, Andrew, why don't you go through the next few slides here, and I'm going to go ahead and mute myself.
Sure. All right. Sorry, just going to have some water. So, as Jen mentioned, we've looked at a lot of census data and other information to try to see some findings. We found a variety of things in this long report, and we're just going to go over a few of them with you that we thought were the most interesting and relevant to thinking about housing needs in Norfolk. And we can go to the next slide. So the population of the town has been increasing since 1980, and that rate of growth is slowing down. So we see here the blue, what color is that? Brown line is the population from 1980 until 2020, and then here the dashed line is the current trend, which is projected to slow down. So that has implications. I mean, all these things, of course, do for housing and what the demand will be. But I think maybe what's a little more interesting in that projection is what we've put on the right here, which is the age of people in town, and that's projected to become more old as time goes on. So you have a bit of an aging population here. It's projected to increase up to 26% of residents over 65, the darkest color there in the top bar. And another half of the town between 35 and 64. So when you think about age, in housing planning, it's important to take into consideration because, of course, everyone has different housing needs as they move through their life cycles. Also, looking at Norfolk compared to the county and the state, there's some interesting differences in income, as Jen was talking about already, and in rental units. So we always look to see what the balance of rental and ownership units are in the town, how many people live in houses that they own or apartments, and how many people rent. To start from, you can see, which is probably not obviously going to be a surprise to anyone, that Norfolk has a really high percentage of owner-occupied units. 96%, only 4% are occupied by renters. And so, of course, same kind of questions kind of come up as you think about people's housing needs and whether or not those needs are being met by what's in the town. And on the right, I think Jen really talked about income earlier, but this is just a chart sort of showing in comparison with the county and the state that there's a large percentage of people in the higher income bracket in Norfolk. This kind of goes along with the same thing, the majority, and I think actually it ended up in the blue there. 92 or whatever percent of housing units in the town are single family detached houses. That's what that blue is. And there's a very small number of units that are either attached townhomes or duplexes, triplexes, et cetera. And that goes along with the large number of ownership units, but it also goes along with this chart on the right, which talks about when the age of housing in the town. And this is pretty interesting, actually, compared to a lot of towns in Massachusetts, even suburban towns and less urban areas. There's still often a lot of older homes, or at least a larger proportion than in Norfolk. So some of this housing units that we see, a lot of single family homes, reflects the fact that a lot of your housing is more recent, was built between, since 1980. More than half, actually, if you look here on the right, was built since 1980. And as you can see, that's quite different from Norfolk County and from the state. This all sort of goes along with that as well. It's interesting to think about when you're thinking about housing needs for a community, how many people there are in each household and how many rooms there are in each house. And this is just a way to compare that and sort of visualize this relationship. So on the left is how many people there are in each household. On the right is how many bedrooms there are in each household. And it's pretty different. There's a lot of 1 and 2 person households. Almost half of the population, half of the households in the town are 1 or 2 person households. But a lot of the housing units, are have more bedrooms than, and of course, there's no sort of objective right or wrong answer to whether or not people would like to or choose to live in a unit that has more bedrooms than people living in it. It's not sort of a value judgment. It's just interesting to point it out in terms of affordability, because if there are households that are smaller in size with fewer people, they might have trouble affording a unit with more bedrooms, which generally cost more. So that's why we like to point this out. This is a little complicated, and we don't need to dwell on all these numbers at great length, but it also relates to the income of the town compared to the state. And what this is showing is how much a household in Norfolk would need to earn in order to afford the average home price. So on the right, the very far right here, $593,750, that's the average price of a home in 2020 in town. Relatively high, but also, as we know, the income of town residents is also relatively high here, $151,000. So based on a very complicated, you can read this small text up here. It's, like interest rates, tax rates, all these kind of things. The state has a sales price calculator that we use to look at how much a household could afford. And the average household in Norfolk could, pretty much afford the average house in the town. This is actually a positive thing. A lot of places have a huge gap between what the average household income could afford and the average price of a house. But what is concerning here is the second column. And we were talking about AMI earlier and the greater Boston area median income. A lot of subsidized housing is targeted at households that are earning 80% of that or below. And those households would only be able to afford, a house that costs sort of less than half of the average house price in the town. So it's a complicated chart. You don't need to totally internalize this whole thing. But the message is, the average household could afford a house, but people that are earning less than basically 100% of the area median income would struggle to afford a house. And here, so we have a definition of cost burden. This is another jargony planner term. We love lots of jargony terms, which is sometimes difficult for everyone else and for us too. But a cost burden simply just means when a household is spending more than a third of their income on housing costs. And this is, not just rent. It also includes utilities. And for a homeowner, it includes mortgage, insurance, and property taxes. And this is a problem because when people are paying more than a third of their income for housing, it really reduces the amount of money that they have to pay for their other living expenses, food, healthcare, education, everything else, transportation. And the 30% is sort of the generally accepted, threshold at which it really starts to cut into your ability to, afford everything else you need in your life. And so this is just a breakdown of cost burdened households in Norfolk. Again, we don't have to, look at this in great detail, but as you see, the yellow are people who are paying more than 50% of their income in housing costs. The green is the 30%. So as you go down the chart, it shows that households that are earning less money are progressively, spending more of their income on housing costs. And we see here like 145 households in the town that are earning, very low incomes and spending more than half their money on housing costs. So these are the people, the households that, really need subsidized housing, the type that is provided through, the units that are on the SHI. Just a couple of quick maps to sort of, clear the air from charts and have something pretty to look at. And also to think about some other factors besides income that, are important to highlight when we're thinking about housing and where to put it. And Norfolk has had some dramatic floods in the past, in the 50s, and the Army Corps of Engineers has, done some work purchasing floodlands and protecting areas from flooding. You probably know about this. So, that creates, this map shows, areas that are prone to flooding. And, there has been some protections from engineering. But of course, we know that climate change is causing flooding and extreme rain, especially, to increase in severity in the coming decades. So, it's important to not, put housing in places that are extremely, flood prone or in dangerous areas to site things. And there has been actually a couple of things, both in zoning and in the stormwater bylaw that passed in the town in 2021 to help address this and require that new developments and new housing has more drainage available to prevent flooding. And finally, we just threw in the zoning map here. It's, the town is mostly residential, as you all know, obviously, and that's the yellow colors here. And in the center of town is the business districts, and those are really the only places where anything sort of larger than a single family home can be built. So it's just another way to look at where there would be a potential to put any type of denser housing. And we also talked to a bunch of people. Some of you were there in some focus groups and some interviews earlier in this planning process to get a pulse on what's going on in the community from your perspective. And these are some things that we heard from folks. A lot of a lack of available units, especially smaller units. There was talk about how much land is or isn't available for the town to purchase. If the town were to purchase land to construct housing, subsidized housing, especially, there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of it available. This is related to the aging population. People are feeling challenged with older residents who wish to downsize, maybe live smaller, and or just need accessible homes, and those are challenges we heard about. Septic capacity, that's sort of more on the infrastructure side. It's definitely an issue in many towns, and Norfolk is not unique in that regard, but it's certainly something to consider. And that people were concerned about mixed reactions to 40B developments. There's about 7 in Norfolk right now. And, that we heard a lot of different reactions to those in the focus groups. And here in the last one, it's just other things that people brought up when we were chatting about housing in the town. People expressed some ideas about requiring more affordable units. That's what inclusionary zoning means, adding more affordable units into new construction developments. And also ideas about mixing those units into existing neighborhoods rather than trying to buy new land and put them somewhere.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Andrew. So now we just want to help digest what Andrew just presented. And we have a series of questions. The first one is what, if anything, confirms what you already knew or suspected. The second is what surprised you. So I'm going to ask that in a moment. And then the third question is what other information do you think we should be looking for? And so the first one, this is an open-ended question. And so you can type in, a phrase, a sentence. You're not limited to just choosing A, B, or C as a polling question. This is just an open-ended question. So what aspects of the findings that Andrew just went over confirmed what you already knew or suspected, if anything? And you can also answer, well, nothing, nothing confirmed, because it was all a surprise. All right, so we're starting to get some answers in here. So the inventory is already low, and the opportunity to acquire more is limited by land availability. And that's something you already knew or suspected. Yeah. And so there's sometimes a little lag as people are thinking of, what to answer for this. And Andrew, I don't know if you're behind monitoring, because I actually might not have turned that setting on for you.
Yeah, no, it's not there, but it's fine. Walter writes in the chat, he's not surprised. He's on the planning board. So he knows these things.
That's good. All right. Okay. So I'm not sure if we're going to get many answers here, or here we go. Okay. So high cost of housing confirmed what you already knew or suspected. Aging population, high income, high prices. Also data. Yes. Data shown as pre-pandemic, because we don't have data from the pandemic yet. So most of what we showed tonight is from 2019 estimates, which looks at the prior 5 years leading up to 2019, including 2019. I believe that's what we're showing, Andrew, right? This wasn't done with the 2020
No.
ACS.
Yeah, these are mostly 2019. There's some, the population and, but some of the more basic ones are from the new 2020 census data.
Yeah, we only have some limited information that the Census Bureau has rolled out from the 2020 decennial census. When the rest of that comes out, your year-round housing unit count will also change. Just so you know, we didn't go over that earlier, but that the 6.01% number that we gave you of how close you are to reaching your 10% for the SHI is based on the 2010 year-round census unit. And so within the next year, we're hoping, by the fall, they'll release the rest of the data and you'll know where you stand. Okay, looks like we've slowed down on that. So I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. So thank you for that. Now, the next thing is, did anything surprise you? What aspects of the findings surprised you, or do you question? Because I really don't believe that everything we find on, the estimates is necessarily 100% accurate or what you see on the ground. And so I always ask this question: what surprised you, or what do you actually question about what we've presented? And you should also know that there's a lot more that we include in the larger draft plan that we put together. We only shared, I think, 8 findings here, but it's a really detailed report. And so I'd love for you to read the whole thing if you're not on the trust and you haven't seen it yet. But in any event, as we're looking for, here we go, here's some answers. So one thing that surprised you was the median income for Norfolk is so much higher than expected. Yeah, that was interesting to me to see too. And I don't know, Andrew, did we look back at any historical data? I mean, we could just look at the plan we did 5 years ago, but I'm actually wondering if that's changed a lot in Norfolk's recent history.
Yeah, I didn't look.
It has been. Okay, it has been high, I think is the answer here. Sorry, Go ahead, Andrew.
I didn't look back at it historically, but that would be interesting to look at.
Yeah.
Oh, Walter responds in the chat. You answered my surprise at 6.01% due to the 2010 housing count. Although the official 2020 count is not out, I believe Susan knows what the count will be. And we can estimate based on the preliminary data, but the DHCD does count it slightly differently based on year-round occupancy. It's all very technical. So yeah. Yeah,
and we can go with the town's estimate, but we just always have to have a caveat saying that once DHCD puts out the official number, whatever we say doesn't matter.
Susan put in the chat that the estimate should be 5%.
So it'll drop down to 5%. Yeah. That makes sense. Thanks, Susan. Okay, so it looks like that's slowing down here. So what else? I mean, I did say that we have a bunch of other information we've collected and didn't share tonight, but regardless of that, you don't know what else we collected. So I'd love to hear, what other information would you like to see us consider when we're putting this plan together? And, the next step is going to be to come up with what are your 5-year goals, look back at your prior goals and see if they're still, if they're still relevant, and then look at strategies, look what you've been able to accomplish in the past 5 years, and then look ahead going forward. But while we're doing that, in the next few weeks, really, we'll be working on that. What other information would you like to see the team consider, if anything? Sometimes there's more local specific information or just any other information you think that you'd like to learn about that we didn't present tonight. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, but I don't know if that's because the lag in response. All right, I'm not seeing anything come up, so I'm going to go on. But if you tried to type something and it's not popping up yet, just let us know in the chat and we can go back to this. All right, so now let's move into next steps and how you can get involved. So one question for you is, have you actually taken the survey yet? So yes, somebody answered. Didn't hear of it before tonight, but I will. Great. And then no, not yet, but I know about it is the other choice. And so people are just starting to answer here. We'd really like broad, broad representation of the community as part of this survey, because what we're asking is about housing, your own housing experience and your perspective on housing, housing needs in the community. And so it's really important that as many people as possible from Norfolk take this survey. And it's a little lengthy, I'm not going to lie to you, but it also loops you into different questions depending on how you answer. And it's just really, really helpful for us. I don't know what the average time spent on it is, but my guess is it's probably around 10 minutes or so. So if you could set aside, 10 minutes or so to take the survey, we're giving you the link. Andrew can put the link in the chat, but this is the QR. Yeah, this is the QR code if you want to grab it on your phone here, or you can grab the link in the chat and take it right after this. Well, the presentation's almost over, so you can take it as pretty soon if you want to do it tonight. The other thing we're doing in addition to this community forum and the survey is we're going to have another community forum in May. It's actually going to be May 24th, so that's right around the corner. And at that forum, we want to present a draft list of strategy ideas and goals, and we really want your feedback on what you think should be included in the plan. And so that'll be a really important one. If you can save the date now, it's May 24th. And I forget what day of the week that is. For some reason, I think it's a Thursday, but don't hold me to that. But it is May 24th. And then we'll be working on the complete plan in basically over the summer with the trust. And then we hope to have a planning board and select board presentation in August, and then submit the plan to DHCD. So it would really be most helpful if you could take the survey, really soon, like in the next week or two would be great. I forget, Andrew, do we have a drop dead closing date that we're going to take that survey down?
Yeah, someone just asked in the chat how long it'll be available. I don't remember offhand, and I have so many things open now that I'm not sure I can find a window to look it up in, but it would be like around the end of May, I would imagine, right? Around.
Yeah, what we can do, we can keep it open if people would like through that second forum. Mm-hmm. We can actually look at the results before then, because we actually use the answers that people are giving us and the ideas to start creating the strategy ideas and the goals. But I think that we can look at the preliminary results to come up with that for sharing at the second forum and still leave the survey up so more people can take it if people would like. So I think that sounds like a fine plan. And then we can incorporate the results, close it down right after that second forum, and incorporate the results in the first draft plan in the summer. All right, great. So that's really everything that we wanted to share with you tonight. But I said in the beginning that we would love to hear from you. If you want to speak in general about housing needs that you see in the community, or any concerns you see or opportunities, or if you just have a question you want to ask verbally. And actually, Andrew, while we're seeing if anybody raises their hand for this, do we have anything in the Q&A to go over?
No, there hasn't been anything there, but I just wanted to point out that Susan said she could put the survey up on the Town Affordable Housing website.
Great.
So the link will be there. I've also put the link in the chat. I'll put it again. And I'm going to put in a link to this link tree here. This link that I'm sharing now has a link to the survey, and it will also have a link to register for the next forum on May 24th. So if you bookmark that link, or Susan can put that on the Affordable Housing website probably as well. That'll have a link to the survey for as long as it's live, and also a link to other information about the plan and the next forum.
Great. Okay, I'm looking for hands here, but I don't see anyone yet. So does anyone want to ask a question or speak or say any words? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so we may not have any questions here. So I guess we could just close it out. That's really everything that we were hoping to present to you, and we're really thankful that you spent some of your evening with us here, and that you care about these issues. So thank you for being here. And Susan, I don't know if you want to say just a few closing words as well. She might not want to.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to let everybody know that Monday's a holiday, and I will speak to our IT department and ask them to get that up on the website. Blythe Robinson, our town administrator, suggested that, and I think it's a great idea. If anyone has any trouble locating it under the affordable housing link, they can certainly reach out to me at Town Hall. My direct line is 508-440-2812. And I just wanted to thank everybody for coming this evening and putting in the time. And if you have any questions outside of this chat about tonight's public forum, please feel free to either email me at sjacobson, JACOBSON, @norfolk.ma.us, or call me at 508-440-2812. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you, Jen.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
We came in at 0.36.